Hey there, my friends. Good morning. Welcome to another installment of Carpo's Philosophy. For what it's worth, I've never really formed an introduction to my videos because they vary so much in content. Can't really attribute one particular subject, but I'm just grateful to have people who join me in these conversations. And yesterday was Logic Church, and I was invited to go on the chat there with a few guys, and we were discussing many different things, everything from, the philosophy of life to what is God, to is there anything after this life, to politics, and, back and forth about just about everything you can imagine. But there was a particular, because it turned into a 4-hour, Google chat, and I didn't even realize so much time had gone by because I'm so engulfed in, conversing about these subjects and find it fascinating. And we all came to the consensus pretty much that we're doing this because it's difficult to find like-minded people to discuss things with in daily life. And even if we did, finding the same time where everybody can get together and have a conversation is very difficult. Google+, YouTube, elsewhere, these have allowed us to not only formulate our thoughts into a video and put it out there, but to actually sit around and converse. And this is where I'm going with this video. The idea that anyone can sit and make a video and make a claim or make a statement, but when you're confronted with people asking you questions directly that you can't refer back to information or Google or post some, scathing rebuttal to it, it allows for the group to do a little bit more critical thinking, a little more careful thinking about the subjects they're talking about. In other words, you can't just, nobody's going to come out in a chat and just say, yeah, well, God just exists this way because it is this way and that's the way it is. You'll see several comments like that on videos, but when it comes to a discussion, people know they'll be confronted about their ideas, so they're more cautious about what they put forward, if they're rational thinkers. Which brings me to really the point of my video here, and I'm not sure how to quite title it yet, but who do you believe and why? And this is an issue that came up when I was talking with Kuntika yesterday about how, people have sent me messages saying things like, hey man, I agree with everything you say, but I hope you're not mad that I disagree with this one thing. And I'm like, please don't agree with everything I say. Don't listen to everything I say as truth or fact. I make it a point not to present anything here as absolute fact that I talk about. Although there are some scientific discoveries that are fact to me, such as the Earth being round and not flat. Now, I've had 100 people probably attack me on that up front saying, hey, you just believe what science is telling you, that, you've been lied to all this time, there are no satellites in space, there is no space program, this is all a fraud, we're living on this flat Earth, whatever the theory may be. I'm just using this example. And I say, well, the consensus reality says different. And they say, well, you're just believing, what mainstream tells you. Which is is really the point here that I'm trying to say is, what do you believe, who do you believe, and why? When you hear somebody making a YouTube video, who's sitting there reciting off things that sound good, sounds like it makes sense, especially to new YouTubers, be very wary if there's a lot of cinematic type work done with it and really intense background music. And finally, people stopped using the Zeitgeist song for the background of their videos, but if you've seen a video that has a creepy, song in it, and they're talking about the destruction of the world and how the end's coming, or whatever it may be, it always seems to be a lot of doom and gloom surrounded by sensationalism. In other words, it's very rare that I see a video talking about negative things where the person's sitting there in front of the camera like this, just saying, hey, this is the fact that I've seen and this is what I think is truth. Those people seem to be very few. It seems like everybody's out there saying, I'm trying to tell you the truth. They're putting truth in the names of their channels, and people have even said, this is what I said to Kuntika, whenever somebody says something like, hey, you're not listening, I'm trying to tell you the truth, and you're wrong, that's kind of like a big F you, big middle finger to saying, I don't care what you have to say because I'm telling the truth. So what do you believe and why? Who do we believe and why? The consensus reality is what I tend to lean towards, but it's not that I just believe it because it's mainstream. When people say mainstream, they're taking this mainstream media and applying it as a blanket statement to all of humanity, as if there is a mainstream human way of thinking. So in some regards, maybe that's true. Mainstream thinking would be survival is important, or taking care of your health, some of these awarenesses that people just have as humans. But there's no such thing as mainstream theories. There's only theories that are more supported by more people, which you can call mainstream if you want. But if there are, the ultimate example is climate science, because I guess the flat earth one, is kind of irrelevant, because there's never going to be a way for anybody to prove to someone that the earth is flat, nor to prove to someone the earth is round. You see, an individual can only be at one place at one time. Until each individual can fly out into space to see it for themselves or not, there's only going to be an argument. But when 99% of the people believe the earth is round, why argue against flat earthers? Well, the flat earthers tend to be more animated. You don't see people out making videos defending the earth being round, or the color blue in the sky. It's just something we agree on, and we scoff at people who say differently. And there are always going to be people who talk about how everything's an illusion and nothing's real and manifesting reality. All of this set aside as fodder. What we've got to do is look at the fact that we are here. Take Descartes' idea of I think, therefore I am, which is all we can truly know, is that we exist. But here we wake up every morning. We live our lives trying to suspect that everything that we've been taught is bunk is an insult to our ancestors who worked their asses off to do these, to do research. People like Copernicus who, had the telescope suppressed for hundreds of years by the Catholic Church because they were afraid of people knowing that the earth was round and that it wasn't a geocentric universe. But eventually we got past that, and now people are trying to bring those old things back and making these claims. But it's come into this modern way of thinking also with ideas like chemtrails, the 9/11 conspiracy, many of these, let's say, the false flag attacks that have happened by governments in order to go into a war. These are real things that governments do. There are real elite out there plotting, various, fake wars, or at least starting a war on a fake premise in order to build income and places like Halliburton. All that aside, this doesn't mean that it's faked. And what people tend to think is when they hear false flag, they start to think everything's faked. And then I talk to people who believe that all the shootings that happen around America, not just that they're set up, or even that the person who did it is mind controlled of some sort, but that it just never happened at all, and that everyone is an actor. And this becomes almost a disease among people. They start to believe that everyone's an actor and everyone's a liar. And then you have no idea who to believe. And this is when people start believing each other. This is when YouTubers start believing one another, and just what they call an echo chamber, where you're just bouncing the same ideas back and forth and saying, yeah, you're right, all right. We've got to wake these people up. Oh man, we've got to educate these people. And if you go to, a majority of these types of videos, the extreme conspiracy type, you don't even have to leave a comment. You just read down and see how long it takes you to see somebody being called a shill by the author of the video. It's usually within the first couple comments. Oh, another shill. As if there's this secret sect of the government that goes to every YouTuber's videos and, edits or tries to silence them. Now the fact is, if this, this great power has better things to do, and this brings me to really my big question. If you believe something is a lie, that we've all been lied to, please ask yourself why you think it's a lie. Because I think that this is one of the questions that I can never get answered by people. For example, with the flat earthers, I say, okay, so you're saying that everyone who's involved in every space program, all the scientists that are involved, all the astronomers that are involved, they are all lying to the general public, meaning that they're all in cahoots in this big conspiracy to convince us that the earth is round. And my question is why? It's a very simple one. Why? What is to be gained by convincing people that the earth is round when it's really flat? Because the majority of people just want to know the truth. If it was flat, we'd go crazy. Scientists would be all over the place saying, yeah, this is amazing, that the earth is flat. It shouldn't be, but it is. but they wouldn't just ignore it just because they've been told that it's round. They're going on, scientific evidences that have been put forth not just in recent history, but for 100,000 years. And then you start to look at the simple, basic ideas that, yes, the other planets are round. Yes, they revolve around the sun. Why would we be in an Earth that is flat and doesn't? Sorry to spend so much time on the flat Earth thing. It's just a good example to me of how people will believe anything, not asking what is to be resolved by waking everyone up to the fact the Earth is flat. And what are people trying to gain from this? Take the 9/11 conspiracy, that it was an inside job. I was very deep into that for a long time, and I believed that it was a false flag, or that I came to the conclusion in my opinion that after looking over all the evidence of supposed explosives going off on the floors before it collapsed, which turns out to be pressure explosion from the dropping floors, pancaking or whatever, and you start to look through all these little details. People are making claims, then you hear about building number 7, which shouldn't have fallen, and you say there's something to it. But the question is, what can they gain from doing this? Well, that one's obvious. And my conclusion was that 9/11, if not created, was allowed to happen by a very small segment of the people that are outside of the governmental control, the elite, people beyond Bush. And they allowed it to happen in order to have an excuse to go into the Middle East. You can look at the evidence, see the purpose of why we would do that. I'm not saying it did happen. I'm saying that there's a possibility and there's actually justified reason why they would lie about this. Hit us in the heart of our country in order to allow us to go into the Middle East and use that as a catalyst for war, but not more than that, to have something to fall back on for the next 20 years. And they're still doing it. Oh, don't let 9/11 happen again, and have we had any major terrorist attacks like that since 2001? No, we haven't. We've had many terrorist attacks abroad in the world. But what I'm saying is they kept telling us that it was going to get worse and worse and worse. Anyway, don't want to get into terrorism, but you can see why a false flag would be allowed to happen. Like Pearl Harbor, there's a lot of evidence that the generals there were well aware, or at least somebody was well aware, that they were coming to attack Pearl Harbor, and we allowed the Japanese to attack because it would be a catalyst for us to be able to go into the war. Is that true? I don't know, but it makes sense. And there's a reason why we wanted to get German scientists to get their technology. We were afraid that they were going to advance beyond us. And there's so much more to it. All I'm trying to do is say there's a little bit of credibility to why certain things may be true and why certain conspiracies may be legitimate. But we have to ask, who's telling us these things? If it's Joe Blow in his basement and the guy's never really been out in the real world, or some 18-year-old kid who's just seen a lot of YouTube videos, no offense, it's not about age, just saying I've been there, and when I was young I was really, really animated about conspiracies, especially in my 20s. I was out there telling everybody about the New World Order, the Illuminati, and all these different things, and the more research I did, the more I saw that it is an addiction. Our addiction to conspiracy theories is a result of our lack of understanding of the world around us and a desire to find somebody to place the blame on for the issues that we face. In other words, it always comes down to these people are repressing us, or these people are bad people, or they're Satan worshippers, or whatever it may be. All that aside, true or not, there are bad people in control, and there are bad people taking advantage. But more than people feeling like others are taking advantage of them, there's a kind of a hidden aspect to it that not a lot of people mention. And this is the psychological, what you might call the God complex. In other words, people believing in God isn't necessarily always about them wanting to believe that they are important so much as making sense of everything. In other words, if you want to understand math and you finally can finish the textbook and you know how to do the work in like basic algebra, you can set it aside and use those tools for the rest of your life. But you don't have to think about them or go back and research them to figure it out. You just remember how to do it. Division, multiplication. The same thing with a religion. If a person finds a religion that fits them and that works, it's a tool. It's a tool people use to live happier lives. It becomes a problem when it conflicts with what somebody else believes because their God isn't the same. But ultimately, wanting to believe that there is a worldwide conspiracy that the elite are really in control of what's going on. The idea of, depopulation and chemtrails and toxic, the idea of depopulation, in my opinion, knowing what I know about science, I know that if there were any group that wanted to depopulate, it wouldn't take very long at all. You could hide out and use a basic virus or even a modified version of some sort of a biological chemical, and it would be easy to wipe people out. Nobody's trying to kill everyone. Everyone's just wanting to assume that there are people who, I'm not going to say nobody wants to kill everyone, and there are people who want to depopulate. I'm not arguing against that. I'm just saying the reality is, to make this world work, in order for the rich people to stay rich, the poor people have to be working to keep the things running, to keep their gas pumping, to keep their cars being built. Depopulating just puts less in the hands of the many. The more people there are, the more stuff there is to, or more people there are to process more stuff. But I don't want to get into that aspect of it. I'm just saying that folks don't realize that many of the conspiracy theories are based on the idea we want to believe somebody's in control. We want to believe somebody's steering the ship. We want to believe that we have a destiny, and if we can't believe that a God is creating a destiny, we want to believe that mankind, even if it's the elite or some hidden shadow organization, that they have a plan for the future of humanity. And that's where we come to the New World Order. I was very curious about this over the years, and I looked back, and the New Order of the Ages, the New World Order, whatever you might want to call it, in its original intention was what Descartes called the New Atlantis. They wanted a country where we could start over, free from persecution, from religious, a place where men and women could go and learn, educate themselves without fear of persecution for what they think or believe. It was based on freedom of thought, and something we take for granted in America now, when there are other countries where you're not allowed to speak. This is why it bothers me when people on YouTube say stuff like, they're trying to silence me and they're trying to quiet me up, and I say, who and why? Do you think they really have time for the little guys? They're not even trying to shut up the big guys. There aren't enough people to shut up all the people. The question is what we're saying and learning even valid, or are the elite just laughing at the people who are talking about flat Earth or talking about, particular conspiracies, knowing that there's no meat to it, there's no way to prove it one way or another. But most of all, back to my original point, which is, what do you gain from knowing it or proving it? Is there anything to really be gained from proving a particular conspiracy? So those are my thoughts on it. It's something that I've thought about for years, because you can become overwhelmed with all the stuff that's going on in the world. But I've finally been able to file all that away in the last few years and say, okay, this serves no purpose to know, this serves no purpose to know, I have no desire to really understand this. And not only the ones that I say wouldn't do any good to know, but then there's the whole other aspect of the ones that you can never really know, such as, where's the universe going, where did it come from, are there aliens on other planets, all these things that are irrelevant because they don't apply to our lives here at this moment. So it's kind of an escapism to project our lives out into what's going on in the world when we haven't even taken care of ourselves. And I know that one well. I'm guilty of it too. For years I talk about this and that and how people need to do this and this and this, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm a member of this society too. I have to have manners. I can't go trolling people, and then I can't go teasing people or pushing their buttons, or my goal is to not piss people off. But there's a line where I feel like I have to speak out. If people are saying things that appear to be untrue, then it's not trolling to call them out. It's saying, hey, I don't want to see my fellow man believing this stuff because one guy says it. And that's how we get the consensus reality. If you Google something, you're going to come up with a bunch that agree and a bunch that don't. Whichever side tends to weigh out, such as global warming, people will argue about whether it's even happening. They'll call it climate change. They'll say that humans don't have anything to do with it. But if you look at the actual paperwork, 97% of the scientists who say global warming is happening, they aren't in one group or one country. They're spread out in all nations. And so, unless every single one of these people is involved in a great conspiracy to fool us into thinking the climate isn't changing, But this is what people believe. They think it's a conspiracy. And I say, well, then other people will say, well, I can walk outside and see that it's warmer. And we know that that's not evidence either. We have, various climate issues and shifting jet streams and everything. The question comes down to, can any one person prove that climate change is real or not real, just by their subjective experience? And no, they can't. So the 97% of scientists who believe it are climate scientists, most of them, and there's a stack of papers they've all gone through to see the actual evidence, and they all confirm it. Then there's a small percentage of scientists who disagree with it. Many of these are in the pocket of other interests. Many of them don't even know anything about climate, and science isn't just science, There are many different aspects to it. And then there are the people who are choosing to follow the 3% over the 97%. But the evidence shows that something is true, and we deny it, even when a majority of our own scientists are telling us. So this is where science becomes the suspect. I've heard so many people say, oh, science is just trying to fool us. Science is trying to lie. Well, that's just like saying humans are trying to fool us. Humans are trying to lie. Sure, some humans are lying, but some aren't. And a majority of people are just trying to live well. You can't let the small group represent the whole. And so that's how I feel about it. I think that we like to blow things out of proportion. We like to see patterns where there may or may not be. And that's an okay thing. It's a beneficial thing that we can use, because seeing patterns helps us survive. And finding happiness helps us survive. And seeking understanding and learning helps us to live a happier, healthier life, as long as we're not in fear. And this is why I feel like we have to be in the middle. You can't just deny that anything's happening. You can't deny that people are trying to control the world, and that false flag events do happen, and that, various climate things are real, but you can't go out and you just say that they're a fact either. Just go along, use the best common sense that you can, if you want to call it common sense. It seems to be not so common. And work together. But try to believe in the consensus reality, even though it's not always true. Because when there's a lie, and it can be easily picked apart, the people are quick to jump on it. But some of these things just can't be proven or disproven, so we just have to use common sense, education, to the best of our ability.